I can see myself at? Or is this some place where I'm going to founder a little bit? One question we always like to ask is, how many of you are going through this process for the first time? This is your oldest child, or mom and dad just go to college. Okay. We love you, pioneer children. And that's really it. Nate and I were both the first ones to go to school in our families. And so I think I was 27 years old before my mom stopped apologizing to me. And yes, I'm older than 27, so thank you very much. But really, I mean, I was like in my wedding dress, and she's like, remember we went to that college visit? And I was like, oh my God, please stop. I turned out just fine. So know that whatever question is on your mind, and Latrice said this too, and so we'll say it again, all you have to do is pick up the phone and call. And even if you don't know this yet, no matter what schools you're looking at, there is somebody at that institution that represents you, represents Naperville North, represents you as a student. The easiest way to find that out is to get on the websites of the schools you're most interested in, click on that admissions page. Somewhere on that page it might say, meet your admissions counselor, or meet our staff. So you click on that, there may be a map of the United States, there may be pull downs, however it shakes out, find Naperville North and find that person. And then we're your contact through this whole process. From tomorrow, or even if you want to get crazy and send some emails tonight, you know, you can do that and just say, hey, I'm thinking about your school. I had 2 questions. That opens up that conversation so that for the next 16 months or so, you've got somebody you know you can call so that you can ask those questions as you go along.
And as Julie said, I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself. My name's Dave Barger. I'm the coordinator of Chicago Regional Initiatives at Illinois State University. Basically, that is a long way to say I did not drive up here 2 hours from Illinois State today. I simply drove out of the city, and I'm the representative for Naperville North High School. I also, based on what Julie said about finding your Nate, finding your Julie, Amy, Latrice, or Rio, and build on something that, whoa, sorry.
We're close.
and build on something that Latrice talked a little bit about, and finding that person, there's a good chance you're going to send us your email. Make sure that is the best portrayal of you that it can possibly be. Sorry, I'm technically challenged, my apologies. So from there, the next thing that you hear a lot of is just getting this conversation started. For those of you who are going through it for the first time, many of you are wondering, guys, you're giving us a lot of great information, but I don't even know how to really start talking about this with my students. That's okay. We're going to give you some of those tips. For parents that have been through this before, one of the first things that I would tell all of you is forget much of what you learned the first time, because this child is unique in his or her own right, and her process will be completely different. And whenever I say that, I always see the parent that looks at the child sitting next to them and go, man, there ain't nobody like you. He's not kidding. So, but you have to keep that in mind when you're going through this process. So to get this conversation started, what Julie and I oftentimes recommend to parents and students is somewhere independently here in the next week or so, parents, you guys sit down, whether it's 10, 20 minutes, a half hour, and put a list together of how you see your students' college search process going. Students, you do the same without mom and dad. And then at some point here in the next week, 2 weeks, whatever it may be, you need to sit down and compare those lists. Because students, here's what I'll tell you. Mom and dad are going to have say in the college admission process. Parents, make sure that you're also listening to the students as well. The reason that you want to start these conversations earlier is because you don't want to start having those conversations, or sometimes that argument, that disagreement when you get to your first college campus. So if the student puts on their list, I'm going East Coast or West Coast, and mom and dad puts, I think Lake County, Indiana, Lake County, Illinois, DuPage, Cook, and if I'm getting real crazy, Kane County. Okay? So when you start these conversations earlier, it helps you go through the process, and there is a good chance that those lists may change, and that's okay as well. The next part that you really want to make sure that you do is actually get on some campuses. And when it comes to the visiting piece, the first thing that I would tell you all, especially students, do not feel like that if you go visit a campus that you have to fall in love with that school. Now, if you come visit our schools and you fall in love with those, it makes all of our jobs easier, but it's just getting started many times. And a great time to do that is your upcoming spring break. So what I'm here to do for you tonight is plan your spring break, and I have the perfect destination for you. Central Illinois in late March. Right? And the reason that I encourage Central Illinois and Lake March is because in about 48 hours, you can see 4 very different places. Where you will want to start is in Peoria at Bradley University. Bradley University is a medium-sized school, very similar to Xavier and Marquette. It's about 6,000 students in an urban area. Peoria is about 150,000 people. You go about 45 minutes to the east, you end up at my employer and my alma mater, Illinois State University. Illinois State is a medium-sized public institution with about 21,000 students. 1 mile directly south of us is Illinois Wesleyan University, which is actually in Bloomington, Illinois. Illinois Wesleyan is a school of about 2,100, selective institution, private liberal arts. And if you go about 45 minutes to the east, you can go visit Amy at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign and see what a large state institution, a flagship institution, as well as a Big Ten institution looks like. So when you're visiting those 4 schools, like I said, don't worry about falling in love. If you do, that's great. But once you've gone to those 4, you'll have a pretty good idea and you can start having that conversation. Big, small, public, private, urban, suburban, rural, and that will help you get through the process.
And I would say one criteria or one part of this process you shouldn't get completely hung up on right now is what should my major be? Because I think that's probably the first question. You talk to your aunts, your uncles, your neighbors, you're like, yes, I'm thinking about going to college, and the first question out of their mouth is, what are you going to major in? Right now, you don't even know what you're going to have for breakfast tomorrow, right? So how are you going to plan the rest of your life? What I will tell you is, students, know what you're good at, know what you're not. And that's probably the easiest thing to tell an admissions counselor, to tell one of us. I really love my English class. I'm really good in history. I like numbers. I'm a helper. If you're the student or you're the friend that everybody comes to when they have a problem, those are the kinds of things that you want to tell us, because then we can say, here's what's in your wheelhouse. Here's the thing that probably is going to fit you as a major. If you are undecided, if you've got 17 things that you love, that's okay. You can tell us, I kind of know it's business, but I'm not sure what the difference between finance and marketing is. Or you can say, last week I really want to be a sociologist, and this week I really want to be a neuroscientist. Okay, it's all the brain. We're kind of in the same general area. One of our friends at Lawrence University in Appleton, Wisconsin, they don't call their students undecided anymore. They call them multiply interested. Fair, right? Because that's what you are. You've got some ideas, you just don't know where it lands. One thing I would caution against, though, is don't tell somebody that you want to major in liberal arts. Liberal arts is not a major. Liberal arts is a philosophy of education. And a lot of private institutions like mine, like Marquette, we have what's called a liberal arts core. So what that means is once you pick that major, in addition to starting out in that major as a freshman, you're also going to have a wide range of courses that range from everything from English to foreign language to humanities to social science to math to science. If it's a religious school like mine, you're going to have some theology and some philosophy. So that you can really stretch your mind. You can start to see how the world works. I think one of the best parts of my own liberal arts education was when I was in those liberal arts core classes, I was next to people whose majors were completely different than mine. So not only did I get to learn from them, I got to learn how they learned. And that helped me immensely as I got into the world of work. My first job in admissions, my boss was trained as an electrical engineer. He was a super linear thinker. As you might guess, I was a communications major. I like the big picture. I like to tell that story. So what I had to think back to was, okay, you had 9 hours of science, you had 3 hours of math, you had a little bit of philosophy. How do I talk to this guy? And so once I realized, I had to tell him, this is what it's going to cost, this is how many people are going to come, and this is what we're going to do after. Guess who got our way all the time? So that liberal arts core is really like learning another language. It also makes you a much more interesting person. So if you are the kind of student that says, you know what, I'm really good at English, but there's just something about that science class that I absolutely love, look for a school with that liberal arts core. If you are undecided, sometimes that liberal arts core can open up your mind to things that you don't even know about yet. And I would say, too, at schools like mine, private institutions, Latrice talked a little bit about small class sizes. Our average class at Xavier is 22 students. So you are going to be in a class where you're going to have to be an active learner. So what that means is you have to raise your hand. You have to come to class prepared. You have to be able to stand up and support what you believe in and have an argument that doesn't turn into a character assassination. You know, that I think is really another piece of that liberal arts education where you can say, I'm a good communicator, I have a sense of logic, and I can do that across the board in many different disciplines. You know, one of the things too that I loved about my experience was, yes, my average class was pretty small, but once I got into my junior and senior year, my classes were incredibly small. I had a class in my senior year of 4 students. So it was me, 3 students, and our professor. It was a little terrifying that first day, for sure, but we learned a lot. We got to trust each other. After a while, our teacher said, you know, on Tuesday, instead of coming here to the classroom for class, why don't you come over to my house? I'll make some dinner, and we'll have class around the dinner table. And the 4 of us looked at each other like, oh my God, that's stranger danger, right? We're not supposed to do that. And so when we went as a group. It was awesome because we got to know our professor as a person, not just that person that stood in front of the classroom, but a person who had ideas and thoughts and really started to shape how we learned. And then that was also a great person for us to go to say, hey, I need this letter of recommendation for this first job, for this internship, because she knew us better than any other teacher we probably had. And so I think that's part of that, knowing yourself as a student. If you are that person that is ready to raise your hand, that is ready to really dabble in a lot of different subjects, who's going to want to use your professors as mentors and friends to springboard you into, here's this internship, here's this opportunity for a job, here's something, and this happened to me a lot with my professors as well, here's something that you can do well that maybe you don't realize yet. And I got pushed a little farther than probably I would have gone myself, and that benefited me tremendously in the end. And that's the kind of environment you're probably going to find at a school. You know, I would say private schools vary so much in size. I mean, here in Illinois, you've got schools like Blackburn College, which is a private school. It's about 640 students. What is that, like a third of your senior class? You know? But you've also got schools like DePaul. It's the largest Catholic school in the country. It's got 22,000 students. So it's not just size. It's that philosophy of what goes on in the classroom.
And I think when you look at the public schools, then that's the first thing that you think about is that we are larger. And when you look at the 3 largest schools in the country, you're looking at University of Texas at Austin, the Ohio State University, and Arizona State University. They range in size somewhere between 55 and 70,000 students. I've heard that the mission of Arizona State by 2020 is to have 100,000 students in their system. That's a lot. So when you go into that, you have to make some decisions, and once again, it's going about the right fit for you. So Julie talked a lot about liberal arts education. You're going to have that same sort of idea at a large public university. We generally call it general education courses, but how we teach those, especially general education courses, are going to be a little bit different. So Julie talked a little bit about active learning. If you're going to look at a large state institution, you need to be okay with a certain amount of passive learning as well. And what I mean by that is when you are in lecture hall sorts of courses, so for example, Ross talked about earlier, he went to a high school with 200 people. I went to a high school with about 400 people. It took 5 towns to make up my 400-person high school. And my first semester at Illinois State, I had a class with as many people as my entire